Going back to the awakening, yeah, there is this I am this awareness, but there's still this human condition, and I think it was Nagarjuna, the Buddhist philosopher, who had the two truths doctrine, which he talks about the truth of the absolute, which is that groundless place, and there's the truth of the relative, which is all of this that's happening right now. And so to negate this part is a disservice to the experience because this is part of it.
Hello, Chris.
Hello, it's so good to be with you. Thank you for having me on, and it's so great to see your face. It's been a while.
Hmm. Well,
Yeah.
everyone, this is Chiss Grosso, and you probably know him from his books. He wrote some books that are very well written, very interesting, and all about awakening. And the first one is called The Spiritualist, and the second one, Everything Mind, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah.
It's from memory.
Yeah.
Great.
Yes. Look at you. Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. And yeah, we're going to talk today about this weird thing called life.
That's pretty apropos. That's yeah.
Yeah.
Whatever this is. Yeah. Yeah.
And the podcast is called Awakening Now. So it's all about awakening before, during, after, whatever comes with it.
I love that. Yeah.
So to start with, I would like to ask your definition of awakening, how you see it. What is it?
Sure. Yeah. You know, um, I want to preface it by saying I try to stay open and fluid, and I think it was Alan Watts who said you have no, I'm going to butcher, it's not verbatim, but something to the effect of you have no responsibility to be the same person you were 5 minutes ago, something like that. And I always loved that because, I've been on this little exploration on this path, whatever one cares to call it, for about 20 years now. And a lot's shifted, over 20 years. The one thing that hasn't, and I guess this goes back to your question of awakening, is this one of my two root teachers, Ken Wilber, he calls it this witnessing awareness. My other teacher, Ram Dass, he says loving awareness. So, to me, just two different ways of saying, I think what they're pointing at is the same thing of this, underneath the thoughts, underneath the judgments and the emotions and all of the human experience. And this is part of that human experience too, is just that awareness, of the pleasant, of the unpleasant, of the things that this vessel called Chris and all the stories that come along with that likes and doesn't like. And I joke with people sometimes that being or having some semblance of awakening, because I know I am anything but enlightened, but I do know that there is an awareness within me that I'm anchored and rooted in more of the time than not. It can actually be really annoying. And I say that it's a gift. I say it kind of playfully, but I can't get over on myself. If I am doing something that's not in alignment with my integrity or that I feel, within my heart or my gut is just, oh, I know I shouldn't be doing this. I know, like I am very, very cognizant of the fact of, that I just this it doesn't feel right. And sure, I still do it sometimes. But that said, I'm exceptionally grateful for this awareness because with it being so annoying, it's over the years gotten to the point, well, it's time to really keep doing the work, clean up certain areas. Because for me, I've struggled with drug and alcohol addiction throughout my life. And when I'm not listening or paying attention to what my awareness and what my body is telling me, a lot of guilt and shame and repressed shadow things start to come up. And I would turn to substances. And anyways, I'm giving you a very long answer here. And I do have a bit of ADD, but that's on full display here. But yeah, so anyways, that's awakening to me. It's just that awareness. And of course, there are individuals like Ramana Maharshi, let's say, who, that to me seems like an individual who is just constantly abiding in that state of pure present awareness, or Nisargadatta Maharaj, or even more recently, I would say someone like Adyashanti seems at least to be pretty awake. And that's awesome. We need these teachers. So I'm grateful that there are those people in this world, and I'm sure there are plenty that we don't know about. They just they go about their lives and they don't want to or don't feel compelled maybe to share it with the world, or maybe they're off in caves somewhere. I don't know. But yeah, I feel like it's certainly something that's becoming in this very scary world. I like to think at least more people are waking up, while also more people are going deeper into their sleep. So interesting time to be alive.
Mm, wonderful. Thank you. Yes.
Sure. Sure.
Mm.
I go in and out of things. So yeah. Sorry, apologies to your listeners ahead of time, but if any of
Oh
them have
no,
ADD,
please
you'll
be
be right on track.
yourself. You know, we are
It's
here
all I know how to
just to
be.
be. Yes, exactly. And could you share a little bit of your story?
Yeah.
Like what
So
happened for you, this
yeah,
awakening? When, how?
yeah. Sure. I had a relatively normal life, like childhood here in the United States. I grew up not poor, but lower like class. We didn't have a lot of money, but my parents always provided. They're amazing people. I'm very lucky to have two awesome parents and an amazing brother. Um, Played sports, hockey, soccer, also skateboarding. I was a very eclectic kid. Back in the 80s, like I was skateboarding when most kids weren't in the East Coast. I was in Connecticut. It was a big deal out in California, where I actually was just recently living. But yeah, most people weren't doing all of that. And I had a very eclectic taste in music. And also, I didn't know it at the time because I didn't have context. I was, I was and still am very empathic. I felt very, very deeply. And it was really hard being a kid feeling that deeply. And now I'm grateful that I understand what it was and ways to work with it. I've also been therapist let me know years ago that I'm a highly sensitive individual and a lot of stuff, that I have to be aware of to take care of myself. Um, One other thing I'll note too, leading into the part where I'll talk a little bit about the addiction thing, is having had a relatively normal childhood, I was and working in the field too. I went to school for addiction counseling and writing, and I've worked and spoken at a lot of mental health conferences and uh, a lot of the stories I would hear, it's deeply rooted in childhood traumas. And a lot of them were, unfortunately, rape or molestation, severe beatings, things that I hadn't experienced. And I'd had Gabor Mate on my podcast. He's a pretty well-known and respected addiction mental health expert. And I mentioned that to him, and he asked me if I'd had any birth traumas. And
Mhm.
it dawned on me, oh wow, yeah, my mom was told early on in her pregnancy that I wasn't going to be carried to term, or if I was, I would have been stillborn, something to that effect. And I was an emergency C-section. Obviously, I'm still here, but what he helped me understand was he was saying everything my mom experienced in those 9 months, the confusion, sadness, anger, frustration, whatever, depression, was all imprinted within my DNA. And he said, the moment you were born, Chris, you didn't have a chance if you put alcohol to your lips or drugs. And, not making an excuse for any of it, but it was helpful for me to understand that. Because going into middle and high school, I was still very eclectic. I was still playing soccer, but I fell in love with alternative music like Nirvana and Soundgarden and Pearl Jam. And so I started becoming more interested in learning how to play instruments, and I wanted to be more of a musician. And modestly, I was a really good soccer player, one of the better people on my team. And then I moved up to the small town East Haddam, and I was doing really well with soccer here. And going into high school, that's when I made the decision I didn't want to play soccer anymore. I wanted to focus on music. And I remember it was a really tough thing for me. The coach, actually, one of the coaches was my neighbor, and he came over and I had to have like a sit down dinner and explain to him why I didn't want to. And in retrospect, like going to ninth grade, having to do that, it's kind of weird. But I did. And so anyways, my parents were super supportive though, and got me a bass and a guitar, and I fell in love with music or fell in love with playing music. And then I was introduced to punk rock and hardcore music from there. And that was incredible. That was some of my earlier spiritual experiences that I didn't recognize as such at the time, but the raw angst of that music and the passion It cut right through to my heart center, and I felt it very deeply and viscerally in a beautiful way. It wasn't until many years later, for the first time, I heard Krishna Das chanting Bhakti and
Mhm.
Kirtan. I had the same exact experience as I did two completely different kinds of music, but they both cut right to my heart center, and I felt them exceptionally deep, beautiful experiences. So, but going back to the punk and hardcore, and I loved indie hip hop as well, and conscious hip hop, and I still love all of this music to this day. It's forever a thing for me. Um, but there was a movement called straight edge, so that was drug and alcohol free, and my
Mhm.
friends were into that, and so I was into that. So the punk hardcore friends I had were going to a different school, and then the friends I had at my school were skateboarders, and they were into drugs and alcohol, which I wasn't. So on weekends they'd go do their thing, and then I would go with my other friends who went to a different school and were a little bit older. They were driving. I wasn't at this point. I'd be going to shows and meeting people, and it was a lot of fun and very cool. Then I got kind of bored of the straight edge thing and started experimenting, drugs and alcohol, and made up quickly for lost time. And it wasn't long before I became a full-blown, excuse me, addict, alcoholic. I was around 19.
Oh.
And that began like this vicious cycle for many years was going down a very dark spiral and going to places I wouldn't wish on anyone and experiencing things I wouldn't wish on anyone. Um, but it was around 2004. It was 2004, so 20 years ago, after I went through my first detox for alcoholism, that I was learning about addiction and recovery. I didn't know about programs like Alcoholics
Mhm.
Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous. I thought I was just a fucked up, weird, horrible human being. And no, it's like this, there's an actual neuroscience to this stuff. So I was grateful to learn about that. Got myself into school and I was learning about addiction counseling. And my professor, I remember, she also became my academic advisor. And I was sitting in her office one day waiting for her, and I looked up at her cork board, and she had like a Ganesh and a Jesus, Mary. I think Krishna was up there. You know, a whole crew of like all these spiritual, wonderful humans and beings. And but I was confused. You know, I didn't know the difference between spirituality and religion. I had no interest in it. I was very atheist. I hated the idea of any of that stuff. I thought it was weak. I thought it was a crutch. And so she came in and I asked her, like, what's going on up there? I thought you pick one and you go with it. And she kind of laughed. And so she started to teach me a little bit about spirituality. And at the time, I was living in a town called Middletown, Connecticut, and we had a great library called Russell Library. And I made that my second home, and I was just devouring everything I could. I started with some of the easier stuff, like Eckhart Tolle and Wayne Dyer and Deepak, but then quickly made my way into like Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche and Thomas Merton and Ram Dass and Ken Wilber and Pema Chodron, and then into the deeper texts like the Bhagavad Gita and the Dhammapada and some of the Gnostic teachings of Christ. And so that was kind of my gateway into it.
Mhm.
And then practicing meditation and visiting various sanghas and gatherings. And I just had a deep reverence and penchant towards the mystical tenets of all these great wisdom traditions, not so much the dogmatic aspects, but and then years later, when I was living up in Canada, I remember something very helpful for me was Liberation Unleashed, something you were involved in, and I'd been, reading some Adyashanti and getting more into, like I'd mentioned, Ramana Maharshi and Maharaj, and looking more at the direct experience. And I remember I got the app and the books you guys had and the pointing out exercises, and then I started learning more about like Robert Adams, I think, and Bessel, or not Bessel, that's a different guy. Rem- One of Nisargadatta's students, name slips my mind. But anyways, a lot of people that were just getting more to let's just get to the root of this. Like, let's see
Mhm.
what's really happening. And I remember I had one of I had, this experience. It was one of the pointing out instructions that was in both. You had the app and I think the app version of the book, and I got both. But one of them that was so helpful for me was close your eyes and then open your eyes. And again, probably not verbatim, but who's doing the looking? Are you, or is looking happening? And
Mhm.
there was a line that I completely stole from you guys, and I give credit though when I remember. But I love whomever came up with this. But looking at the movement of everything that's happening, it's simply life lifing itself. Like life is lifing itself through this body. I have a very lay appreciation for um, physics. I don't know much about it, but learning about evolution and the way in which like all of this has come, and that's why I love a lot of the teachings of Buddhism too, and learning about the different mind practices and the skandhas and the samskaras and their take on all of this. But yeah, so here I am today, and I still usually am surrounded by a lot of spiritual books, and I go in and out of them. And but I find today my great teacher is I try to spend time in nature and go hiking and just leave my books at home, leave my headphones at home, just go with some water or protein bar. Some I hate to carry this bear mace because I did have a bear encounter once, and I have to protect myself. But I just go out there, and that to me is my it's healing, and it's teaching, and it's learning, and it's listening, and it's I think that's where I get my deepest teachings these days, is just being amongst the movement of life and understanding that this thing walking through these woods is just another extension of all of that. So yeah. So anyways, thank you very much. You, whether you know it or not, have had a very deep impact in my journey as well. So I
Mm,
appreciate you deeply for that. Thank you.
thank you.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah. It's true. It's true.
Yeah, I always say that the nature is the biggest teacher.
Yeah. It
Like
really is.
everything
Like,
is there. Like every
mhm.
question you can think of is there.
Yeah. And also people, I just moved back to Connecticut from California um last week, actually just a week ago. And one of the great teaching learning experiences of my life happened out there. A lot of them did in a myriad of ways, but I was working on for the first time, I actually got a job again, writing and public speaking. I'd been self-employed for like 10 years. And California is not cheap. Actually, I was living in San Diego, which in the United States is literally the most expensive city to live in currently. That's part of what precipitated me moving back to Connecticut, though
Hmm.
I'm so grateful to my for my time there. But I worked for 6 months on as a hybrid unit. It was originally what was called a memory care unit, which was working with dementia and Alzheimer's residents, and there was hospice residents there too. And then it started to become a mix of they brought in mental health residents, so schizophrenia and bipolar addiction. There were people on suicide watch, sexual abuse survivors. I mean, some incredibly tragic, horrific stories of what happened to some of these people. And so for these 6 months, I was working, 50, 60 hours a week on this unit. And I saw the human condition in every virtual capacity you could experience it in there. Literally sitting with people while they were transitioning, holding hands, sitting with family, seeing people covered in feces. They would be cleaned up, but people that just couldn't get out of bed. Then there were some of the psych residents, and I literally it had my life threatened several times. I was spit at, had things thrown at me, called every name in the book. Um, De-escalated some really sometimes scary situations, but I saw some really beautiful things too. People that had like aphasia or could barely talk, and I would bring my Bluetooth in and play soul music with them sometimes, or old rock and roll for people, and they would be happy and start singing and do art. And it was so, yes, nature for me is my great teacher, but that was what an experience, really just meeting. these situations and these beings to the best of my capacity each day
Mhm.
with an open heart, with compassion, with empathy, not taking it personally when you're getting spit on. Like this person, their mental faculties, they're not there. It is not about me in this moment. And, trying to anchor into a mantra like I am loving awareness in this moment, or Om Mani Padme Hum, or just something to keep myself grounded and rooted, as to not like, because the body is the body, like there is fight or flight, and someone's coming at me. There was this one resident, he used to be in a gang, in the Crips, and we got along really well. I was kind of his go-to person there when he was having
Mhm.
a hard time, but also he had severe schizophrenia. So there'd be times where it would flip, and he would get in my face, and he was bigger than me and red-faced, and he's one of the people who threatened my life. And so when that happens, luckily, I know how to de-escalate, but I still have to be aware of my body in that situation because you are in danger.
Right.
So, being conscious of my breath, being conscious of, again, trying to keep these mantras going, or just present and in my experience, grounded, rooted. And yeah, thank God for 20 years of meditation practice and mindfulness practice and all of the things that I learned up to that point. Because, I won't name the facility, but transparently, they had a hard time keeping people in those positions because they're not easy jobs to do.
And so
And so
many
they would,
hours as well.
oh yeah, a lot
That's
of, well,
intense.
it was a 40-hour work week, but we were often short because people would quit or not show up
Hmm.
for their shifts. And I didn't want to leave the residents short, but you get to the point where they would hire people that had no experience, with this, and they had no business being on that unit as an employee, unfortunately. And that made my job more difficult because of, instead of de-escalating situations and not having the proper training and not really knowing the correct way to work with these residents, it would actually amplify behaviors at times. And that's not to say everyone there was like that, but more people than not, um, didn't have the skill set to do that work, and it just made it very tough. But anyways, just sharing all that because, yeah, now being removed from that experience, it's been about over a month since I worked there. Uh, I really am filled with a lot of gratitude. I certainly also left with, some trauma that I've been working through, and I still see a therapist, because awakening or not, again, I have to honor this human experience, and that's something too that I know, kind of diverting here, but I I realized years, it's been a while. I don't think I really do it anymore, but spiritual bypassing was a thing for me too. Like
Mhm.
I would meditate because I didn't want to be Chris. I didn't want to be human. It was like a nuisance, a hindrance to me to be this thing. And so I would meditate to just almost for the same reasons I would drink or use drugs. I didn't want to be in this experience. I wanted to just like tap out for a little while. And luckily I've realized, no, that's not what it's about. The range of emotions, while they can be exceptionally unpleasant at times, that's what it means to be human. And yeah, I'm grateful to be aware and awake, but also I'm grateful to be a human. I mean, sometimes I'm not, I'll be honest. Sometimes I'm like, fuck this. Like, I've taken bodhisattva vows. And I'm like, what was I thinking? If that's some real shit, I'm gonna come back and do this again. And I mean, if the reincarnation thing's real, I know I've got plenty of karma to burn off. But no, on a good day, I am grateful for this thing, and it is okay. Like, if it wasn't for this human experience, you and I wouldn't be having this conversation. I wouldn't be out in the woods experiencing nature. I wouldn't be able to help people in whatever capacity I can, whether it's through my books or these podcasts or, work I do, whatever it is, like showing up and helping other human beings with their suffering, because that's to me what it's all about. My main root teacher I mentioned is Ram Dass, and his guru was Maharaji, and his teaching was simply love, serve, remember. Love everyone, remember God, serve everyone, and tell the
Amen.
truth. And so that's why, yeah, I tell the truth, it's not always pretty, but yeah.
Wow. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for listening to
Yeah,
that.
and being all this sensitive and empathic being
Mm,
must be so intense in such a facility, such intense training for this, loving,
yeah,
serving, like,
yeah,
not doing one degree of university, just like normal human being, maybe
yeah,
100 all at once.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I remember when I went in and I did the orientation, it was down the hall and it's a locked unit because there's residents that you know aren't allowed off the unit, rightfully so, because of the mindset or the whatever the proper wording is. They don't have the capacity to go out into the public, unfortunately. But I remember um, finishing the orientation and walking out, and the unit was down the hallway, and I heard some screams, and I was like, "Oh, is that where I'm working?" And then I went for the tour, and it was, and I was like, "Oh my gosh!" And I went on the unit, and it was around Halloween too, and I remember they decorated outside of the door, and I was surprised. They put up. I love Halloween and horror movies, and so I loved this, but there was like bloody handprints and like enter at your own risk, like Halloween decorations. Within the first couple of days, I'm like, whoever decorated, I don't know if they were doing that on purpose, kind of like a little like, just seriously enter at your own risk or not. But it was pretty fitting for that unit because it was wild. But
Especially for
yeah,
you. See if you get
yes,
scared.
yes, absolutely. Um, but yeah, no, and so anyways, I did make some friends there, and I stay in touch with them, and I ask about some of these residents because or I built at least a rapport and
Mhm.
a relationship with them, and I certainly miss them, no matter what. Like I felt some of the harder ones, I felt the closest to, the ones that other people didn't want to work with. I was drawn to them for whatever reason. And one of them actually 2 days before I moved back, she passed away. And I was grateful though, because she was in end stage dementia and she was not cognizant. She had very few moments of any semblance of lucidity in her life. But I would spend time with her and she would yell and she could be very nasty, but she could also be so beautifully sweet. And her husband would come in and visit, and he was such a kind person. And um, I found out she had passed away through a friend that still worked there, and so I texted him um, because you're not supposed to like have numbers of family members, but
Mm.
he and I exchanged numbers because I knew she was a very delicate situation there, and he saw that I would take extra time with her, and I was always happy to talk with him outside of work and just let him know how she was doing, and so yeah, I let him know, and he gave me such a sweet response. I didn't realize the impact I had on him. But it was really beautiful to know that like his gratitude for the way I showed up for her. And I don't see things like that when I'm doing them. I just show up. I just do whatever I feel is right in my heart. So it's nice though sometimes to understand how somebody else might experience that. It's sweet. So
Thank you for
yeah,
sharing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm. I like your background. I'm sitting on a bed in this room I'm currently staying in. I'm realizing I have no background going on, but yours is really nice.
It's for both of us.
There you go. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Mm. Yeah, it's often people look for this awakening or some kind of exit out of this human condition. And as you mentioned that, and you went into this pit of the human condition, a
Mm,
difficult thing to see, but we can't run away from that.
right. Yeah. You know, I'm reading this book. It's really, really wonderful. Almost done, about 150 pages in. I don't know if you've ever heard of this book, but it's called In Love with the World. And teacher is I'm gonna butcher the pronunciation, but Yongey Mingyur Rinpoche. And what's it called? Yeah, In Love with the World, a monk's journey through the bardos of living and dying. And I'll just, if you don't mind, just because I'll read a little bit about it and I'll tell you why I'm sharing this. It's a rare, intimate account of a world-renowned Buddhist monk's near-death experience and the life-changing wisdom he gained from it. At 36 years old, Yongey Mingyur Rinpoche was a rising star within his generation of Tibetan masters. One night, telling no one, he slipped out of his monastery in India with the intention of spending the next 4 years on a wandering retreat, throwing off his titles and roles in order to explore the deepest aspects of his being. When he ran out of money, he began his life as an itinerant beggar in earnest. Soon he became deathly ill from food poisoning, and his journey took a startling turn. In this powerful and unusually candid account of his inner life of Buddhist master, Yongey Mingyur Rinpoche offers us the invaluable lessons he learned from his near-death experience. By sharing with readers the meditation practices that sustain him, he shows us how we can transform our fear of dying into joyful living. And it's
Mm.
it's a wild read. So like it says, he kind of like sneaks out of this monastery. He set this whole thing up to kind of get out of this cushy monastery life he had had to really try to like uh what was it? Unlearn or just throw off his not his just his literal robes, but his metaphorical robes as this individual and just who am I outside of this monastery? And he just goes to live the life of this renunciate beggar. And what made me just think of that when we're talking about the human condition, he goes and visits the Ganges River, and I think it was in Varanasi, and talking about how they just burn the bodies there, and you just smell the flesh, and it didn't really phase him because of his tradition, but he writes at one point about seeing some Westerners and their what he could only imagine their experience probably was there, but it's the human condition.
Mhm.
It's that's why I love a lot of the like Buddhist death practices or the practices on like the repulsions of the body and the phlegm and the sinews and the secretions, and it's all part of it. Oh, look at our little friend. And then we get to experience beautiful little kitties. Oh my goodness, who's
Oh,
that?
the little kitty just came over. Say
Oh,
hi.
what a sweetie. Hi.
Cat
Oh,
cat condition.
I love it. I love it. Um,
Oh no. Oh.
but
Uh,
yeah, no, that's what I love when I do my podcast. I tell people like I've had people where somebody will show up at the door and knock and the dogs start going wild. Like, oh, you can edit that out. I said, no, we are not editing that out. It's real life. These things happen. It stays. Um, but yeah, I just I love this story of somebody who decided to just do this. And also it's fascinating to me because here he is with all of these years in a monastery in this high prominent position of a Tibetan, master. And he's very transparent about when he gets out there, like that human condition coming up. And he's like, he gets agitated and he smells things that are disgusting and he sees things that are disgusting. But the beautiful thing is he anchors into this awareness that we've been speaking of. And it's like, he's like, okay, it doesn't mean I have to like this smell, but also I can't change it. So I'm not going to fight it. I'm not going to create a story around it that's only going
mhm.
to make it that much worse. And to sum it up, I know in the Western Buddhist scene, there's a saying, right now it's like this. I like that saying a lot. It's just an easy way of saying, it is what it is, whether it's good or bad. Right now, it's like this. This too shall pass, whatever. But yeah, it's like these stories and the aversion and the no, I don't want that, that, you know, churns unpleasantness into suffering or that grasping, again, Buddhism, the I want to hold on to that. Can't hold on to anything. As I'm sure it's all changing. Um, that's why I love Taoism too. Just go with the flow.
Here she is. Yeah.
Yeah. She is so sweet. How long have you had her?
Well,
Seems like a
maybe her mom brought her like this big,
oh,
maybe 8 weeks ago.
Oh my gosh. She's precious.
Yes.
Oh, I used
You're
to have a cat too.
beautiful
Love kitties.
girl. Say
Hi.
hello to everyone.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. Hello. Go now.
Oh, what a sweet guest.
Mm. Yeah, very sharp nails though.
Oh yeah. Careful, careful.
Mm. And what I'm learning, I'm not like learning, noticing, facing, is that the way to liberation, to freedom, or more joy or happiness, or whatever everyone is looking for, is through feeling the unwanted stuff.
Mm,
So human
yes.
condition. Like the
Yeah.
more we can agree with that resistance that yes, I don't like it, but this is like it is now. The
Right.
more we can do that,
Yeah.
the more we can access these horrible, nasty, awful feelings that are coming up anyway, human condition, the more it gets freed, something gets
Yeah.
freed. Because otherwise, we
Yeah.
spend life in resistance. Our precious life energy is working on suppressing,
Yeah.
denying, running away, and
Yeah.
doing all kinds of tricks not to feel that.
Yeah.
So I think this is
Willingness.
the open secret
I love that.
because it's
It's
everywhere. It's here. It's just we don't know
yeah, right. And that's been what's a game changer for me is an honest commitment to cultivating the willingness
that. Mm.
to sit with these things. I am currently sifting through a really wonderful 30-part video series, and it's free if any of your listeners are interested. Um, it's on YouTube. There's a great page on there. I actually discovered while working at that job I mentioned on the unit. It's called Therapy in a Nutshell. And
Mm.
because I was going through a lot, a lot of different emotions. And oops, sorry, my sound just went off. But I was going through a lot of different emotions and just looking for different ways to work with them because it was overwhelming at times. But anyways, she has this 30-part series and it's free, which I love that. She has the course online where you can pay for it if you want and get extra like materials. But she does it in a way where if you don't have the money, she just wants people to have access to this and she'll tell you what to do if you can't like get the download the forms. But the whole course is basically about processing emotions and working through them
Mm.
and cultivating the willingness to sit with them. And I'm only on like I think part 8 out of 30, but the whole first 6 are all really about willingness and learning to like be almost like an investigator into what's going on inside, being inquisitive, not judging. And I'll tell you that alone, like, okay, I'm feeling this right now. Where's it located? What's it feel like? Hi, how are you? What's going
Mm.
on? Having almost like a more of a friendly, and it's not easy at times, don't get me wrong, but in learning to do this, so quickly I have found, and it seems to be the same for most people, these almost overwhelming feelings start to almost immediately digress a bit and go down. Like they just want to be acknowledged and having some semblance of compassion towards them. What a beautiful experience. And so, anyways, that's something I've been going through. And it's been so helpful, so helpful. And the other thing I like is she talks about yeah, there is a time and a place for coping skills. That's, in life we need those, but she's more interested in resolution skills.
Right.
So that whatever keeps coming up, let's get it up and let's process it through. Let's re-own and reintegrate this stuff. And I love that. It's been super helpful for me. And it's helped me see ways that even though, on Sunday I'll have my years free of alcohol. And I'm so glad. Yeah, it's like, wow, like I did it. I went through the hardest year of my life and I didn't drink over this stuff. And it wasn't easy. It was really hard. But in a way it was easy because the place I was at where I started this year, I mean, I woke up in an emergency room. Not the first time that's happened to me, sadly, but I woke up yet again in an emergency room in California, and I was naked. I don't remember getting there. I had no clothes. They had to get clothes out of the donation bin for me. They had to call a cab because I was staying. It was a friend paid for me to stay 3 nights at a hotel. I was basically homeless at this point. I had nowhere to go, and luckily that morning, in a town called Carlsbad, there's a non-medical detox place called the First Step House. Saved my life. It's a 10-bed place, and I've never non-medically detoxed from alcohol. I don't recommend it because you can have seizures and it's dangerous, but that's the way that they do this. And yes, people have gone out in an ambulance to a hospital, but I'm grateful for that experience. I didn't sleep for 5 days. I didn't eat for 5 days. I was climbing the walls. I Every fluid you can think of was coming out of my body. It was disgusting and awful and terrible, but I needed to experience that. Because I have withdrawn from alcohol before, but always with benzodiazepines, and
Ah,
you're basically just really high. And
yeah.
I realized, wow, I could do that all day long. Like, sure, it's still not fun,
Hmm.
but it's way easier
Yeah.
to sit through that experience and feel it entirely. I needed that. And so that was what really started to shift things for me this time around. And not only that, but doing the work. I've been doing the work for 20 years, but like taking an unflinching look at myself and something I've got to get credit to as well. And I don't know how much time we have, a little time. I haven't talked a lot about this because I'm still trying to find the context, and it can be very delicate for people. But prior to going to California, um, I ended up on a psych unit twice in a 3-month period. It was during my relapse here in Connecticut, and my ex-fiance and I had broken up because I'd relapsed, and it wasn't a healthy dynamic for her whatsoever. She was entirely right, for that relationship to end, and um, but I stayed in the apartment after she left, and I was just drinking around the clock, and it was bad. Uh, I was very suicidal. I would just drink myself into a blackout, and I remember when I'd come to, all I would see was a kitchen knife on the coffee table, uh, because I was thinking about killing myself, and I didn't know I was going to talk about this today, but it's coming up. So, um, yeah, it was like 2 or 3 in the morning, and I called the ambulance on myself because I was scared, I was going to do it. And so I ended up on a psych unit for 13 days. And I went from there. I got a scholarship to a 30-day residential program in Pennsylvania. And something wasn't clicking for me. I really wanted to get better, but my heart wasn't in it. And I remember telling my counselor there, I'm like, I'm scared. I want this, but part of me just, it's not there. And so I finished my 30 days, and I went back to my apartment, and within 5 minutes I was drinking again. And that cycle started for another 2 weeks. And then I ended up on back at the same psychiatric unit again,
Yeah.
suicidal. And after 3 days, I hadn't gotten out of bed. And the team of psychiatrists was there, and they told me my body, I was treatment resistant, and I didn't know what that meant. And I'm like, no, I'm taking the Lexapro and the Abilify. I'm taking these antidepressants you guys are giving me. Nothing's working. And they go, no, that's what we mean. Your body is not responding to the medication. That's what treatment resistant is.
Hmm.
And they said, if you're open to it, we want to try to give you 3 rounds of oral ketamine. And
Hmm.
I'd done some research on that. I'm always curious about different medications and things with addiction and recovery. And I'd read about psilocybin and ayahuasca and MDMA and all these different things. And I know it's controversial, but I'm always a proponent for those things for people,
Mhm.
even though I had not used them. Um, I had actually, I had microdose psilocybin with great help for my depression for a while, but I've seen it help so many people. But I've done this research and I know it can also harm people. So that's why it's delicate. But they gave it to me, and for the first time in a long time, I felt good. I was like, oh, like, okay, it wasn't this overwhelming depression. I remember I left there and I walked outside and I took a deep breath and I felt like some semblance of love towards myself. And I felt okay. And so, anyways, I went to California and I was scholarshiped to 3 months to a sober living there through a music based program through the Grammys. But I still wasn't ready. And I ended up drinking, and it definitely wasn't linear. But then I ended up in San Diego, and that's where I ended up in that hospital, and things started to change. And over this last year, there was a period where there was a company, and I had done at-home ketamine therapy with
Mhm.
integration sessions and counseling, and seeing a therapist, and also worked with microdosing with psilocybin. It got me off all the medications I was on, which was a lot. And like when I say I've done the deepest dive into myself over this last year, I certainly have. And those medications, particularly the ketamine, um, it left me with nowhere to go, seeing things about myself that I needed to see and I needed to learn, but also learning to have compassion and forgiveness for not knowing before these things. And, and now knowing. And part of that too is working the 12 steps with my sponsor and making amends where appropriate. And so it's not just about those medications, those are part of the foundation, but it's the therapy, it's the service work in and out of the rooms. I was weekly going down and working with the unhoused and volunteering and just giving back and showing up. And so there's a lot that goes into this wellness over this last year and will continue to. So, going back to the awakening, yeah, there is this I am this awareness, but there's still this human condition, and I think it was Nagarjuna, the Buddhist philosopher, who had the two truths doctrine, which he talks about the truth of the absolute, which is that groundless place, and there's the truth of the relative, which is all of this that's happening right now. And so to negate this part is a disservice to the experience because this is part of it. In the Heart Sutra, form is emptiness, emptiness is form. They're completely interconnected. So, learning to find a balance of those two while understanding, of course, that awareness is the absolute, the Atman. And then down here is the Brahman. But there's still, or God in Christ or whatever one cares to call it. I don't care. Um, but finding that balance. So, um, yeah, thanks for letting me talk a little bit about that.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah,
Because it also helps people to dispel that silly idea that awakening is beautiful, happy ever after.
yeah,
It's actually an
yeah.
invitation to face the human condition.
Agreed.
Like that guy in the book, like he just left the comfortable life and went down the road and see where it's gonna take it.
Yeah,
Experience all
yeah,
this messy stuff and ugly stuff.
yeah.
Yeah.
I have such a respect for that. Like that's real to me. That's
But
real.
now it makes such a sense why you went to work into that place. You kind of needed to
Yeah,
see that to sober up
yeah.
from the
It's
patterns. We're still running that.
it's been a wild ride. I mean, the whole thing, but especially these last few years. I kept journals in those two. psych hospitalizations. And that was originally what the book was going to be, was those that experience. But then, I ended up in California and it kind of went full circle from
Mm-hmm.
being suicidal on a psychiatric unit to then working with people
Mm-hmm.
who are
Yeah.
suicidal on a psychiatric unit. And now coming back to Connecticut. And so yeah, I'm still figuring out like, wow, so what is the arc now? Because it's not, I could have taken the easy way out and just done the journal and that still would have been, I think, interesting for people, but there's more to it than that. So
I think this
still
is
figuring it out.
the plot for the new book. It's
Yeah, yeah,
unfolding
it's
right in
there.
front of you. Yeah.
I know. I know. But every time I sit with it again, I'm like, no, there's still it's just wait.
Mhm.
But we'll see. We'll see. No.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I said, I'm grateful for all of it. And it is nothing short of a miracle that this body still exists. I've lost so many people
Mm.
to overdoses, to suicides, just gone, in my opinion, far too soon. But I don't know why I'm still here and they're not, but I don't want to take that for granted. And I wanna be present and be able to help others while I'm still, working on my own healing too. But this life thing's not easy, but it's worth it. I do believe that. At times I question that, but in my heart I know it's worth it. So yeah.
Maybe somebody listening is getting what
Yeah,
they needed to
yeah.
hear.
And I think, sometimes people have said to me like you're brave for like talking about these things. And I'm like, no, no, I'm not. Um, I talk about it. I didn't coin this. I don't know where it came from, but I read once years ago, I recover out loud. And that's not just about drugs or alcohol. That's just
Mhm.
about the human experience. But I recover out loud so people don't die in silence. And that hit me so hard. Because I was dying in silence, you know. Um, and I know people who've died in silence. And I know there's people right now that are suffering that don't need to suffer, in silence because they're ashamed or they're scared or they're confused and they don't know what to do. And that's a fucking horrible place to be. Um, I've been there a lot. And one of the gifts of all this is that I know today I don't have to do it myself. Um, it's okay, talk to people. Like I used to carry all of this and I didn't feel worthy of talking about it. And I mean, you could talk to me about it all day long. I will show up for you. But who am I to put what's going on in here out into a world already filled with chaos and suffering and war and death and tragedy? Like, I don't want to be any part of like more unpleasantness in this existence. But uh, it is okay for me to talk about these things today because that's what I need to do to take care of this so that I can then show up and help other people, also do the
Absolutely.
work. And then in turn, they can help more people. And this is just one way in which, one little way that I can give back, and that's what I want to do. So,
And you're
yeah,
already doing that.
I'm trying, trying.
Well, I read so many testimonials of your books. What people say, oh my God, this is exactly what I needed to hear, or you helped me so much. And every time I guess a message like this comes back to you, it's like, yes, I'm on the right track.
Yeah,
Whatever I'm saying is being heard somewhere. Somebody needs to hear this.
yeah. That's my hope,
It's the
I love when
truth.
people, it is. Yeah. I love when people dedicate whatever the practice is, to may this merit be to the benefit of all beings. And that's what I I don't always verbalize it, but I think it, like may whatever I'm doing today, of course, like help heal this, but be of benefit in whatever way in the world. Even if it's just me showing up and smiling at a stranger, we never
Mm,
know. Like these seemingly little things could have big impacts. Little
exactly.
small acts of kindness. Hold the door for somebody behind you, doesn't matter. Just be nice, you know.
Mm. And my
I
little kitten came back to say hi.
oh, so sweet. So
Even
sweet.
run. She's going like this. Mm. Oh, it's so nice to have this kitten to balance this heavy cute
I
human condition.
no accidents. I'm so glad it's showing up because there it is, right? Like the beauty, the ugliness, the grace, the yeah, yeah.
Mm. Well, thank you so much, Chris, for sharing your
Thank you.
heart, for being
Yeah,
open, for being
yeah.
of
Thank you.
service,
Same to
and for
you.
healing you.
Uh, Work in progress, but it's in progress at least. So yeah. And my sincere thanks to you too. Like I said earlier, and I mean you've you've played a role in my journey, which I'm so grateful for. And I'm so glad you're doing your podcast and you're helping people in your way. And I am always here to support you and cheerlead you and the work. This is what we need, like it's so scary in the world right now. I feel kind of ignorant, but I don't watch the news. I don't want to have my head in the sand, but I'm barely keeping my head above water some days with, my own stuff to look at just what is going on in this world. It's enough to like drive someone off the deep end. So knowing that there are people like you doing this and I'm trying to do my thing too. And oh, I hope it's enough.
Oh,
But
of course, it's
so,
enough. I mean,
yeah.
there's always balance.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. It's true. Yeah.
Okay,
So thank you.
thank you. And thank you, everyone who listened, watched. And if you have any questions or you want to get in contact with Chris, do you have?
Oh yeah. I don't have my website anymore, but I'm on social media on I think
Okay,
Instagram and Facebook. It's just my name, but with the letters X before and after it.
okay,
And yeah, I respond to messages. Sometimes it might take me a little bit, but I get back to people for sure.
sweet, sweet.
Yeah.
And thank you, everyone, and see you next time. Bye for now.